Hi, Ami. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you, Neil. Good to be here.
Yeah, good to have you. This is the first time we meet, and this is for me, it's a big celebration. We are the first FinTech Week for the UAE and Israel, and you represent the Israel Innovation Authority. But before we dive into everything that you are doing, I want the audiences to know a little bit about you, about who you are, even in past experiences. So give us a little bit of a background.
Okay, Neil, thank you. It's a great pleasure to have this session jointly with United Arab Emirates and all the people watching us around the globe. I'm Dr. Ami Appelbaum, and I'm the Chief Scientist in the Ministry of Economy and Industry and the Chairman of Israel Innovation Authority. That's a public servant, but I did not make my career in the public sector. I spent 36 years of my career in the private sector. More specifically, the past 22 years, I was working for a company in the business of semiconductor equipment, a global company that headquarters is in the Silicon Valley and have a branch here in Israel. Prior to that, I got my PhD in material science, and maybe anecdote that I grew up on a kibbutz, for those of you who know what kibbutz is. And 3 years ago, I decided to stop my work in the private sector in order to pay back to the community. I think that what I learned in the private sector, working for global company in the high tech, have a lot of value for Israeli startup companies and the Israel economy. And I decided to take a few years and give and serve the countries rather than serving myself in the private sector.
Wow. Yeah, that's exactly what I wanted our audiences to know a little bit about you. And of course, Israel's Innovation Authority, I've been noticing in the last years that a lot of nations from all over the world are coming to Israel, wanting to partner, to learn, to collaborate. Delegations are flying. So many delegations are coming to learn about what's so unique about Israel. So first, I want you to give me your overview about the Israeli ecosystem, the Israeli high tech, and then, of course, about the role of the Israel Innovation Authority.
Okay, that will be a pitch of 45 minutes if you have, and I can talk for hours on that. But what I think happened in Israel is the creation of ecosystem that if any country wants to move on in the adoption and developing and adoption of new technology, there is no silver bullet. There is an ecosystem of multiple vectors, multiple channels that all have to set up and move and create the situation. It starts with the culture. And different countries have different culture, and you need to tailor where you want to go with your culture. In Israel, a culture that the environment created for us and the neighborhood that we are living in is the culture of innovation, because when the Israeli pioneers came here 100 years ago, they found partly desert and no natural resources, limited water, and no really land that they can cultivate. So they had to be very innovative in order to start developing farmland and to provide for themselves food. And very shortly after, not much energy. So they had to develop the heater system, water heaters from from a solar panel, not electric panel, just to heat water. Not enough water, so the dripper were invented. So the environment here forced the Israelis to be very, very innovative, not because they can make money. it's survival. It was absolutely survival. It was to be or not to be.
Wow.
And many of my grandparents and that came from the Holocaust, they had to rebuild their life. And if you know that you are with your back to the wall and the environment is hostile, and you came from the ashes of Europe, or you immigrated from the Middle East where they came almost barefoot, I would say, the necessity become the main driver. And I argue that necessity is the mother of all invention. And that's one element. Other elements that work for us, for that matter, which is a tough situation, and we did not choose to be there, but that's what the environment here is, a geopolitics. We were surrounded with hostile countries. Thanks God, we have a peace agreement with Egypt now, we have a peace agreement with Jordan, but it was not so 3 years that I grew up. Now we have a normalization and peace agreement with the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain, which is a major, major, major breakthrough, and we appreciate it so much. So now, but that, I would say, security situation force Israel to take action that not many countries take. And every 18 years old men and women draft for the military service. And the military service is very, very demanding. That said, it makes you mature very quickly, because all of a sudden you have a gun in your hand and you experience with a lot of technologies. So all of a sudden, 18 years old, 20 years old boys that in other countries go to school, here he's working with a top-notch technology. So, and it changed your childhood, I would say, to become adult very quickly. So it's part of the ecosystem. And then there was a move by the government 50 years ago that we always like, especially in the democratic country, to criticize our government. But I have to credit our government that 50 years ago said, if we want to be advanced in technology, we, the government, need to give the private sector money in order to invest in research and development. And they established the chief scientist position. And the chief scientist vision and task by law is to invest public money into the private sectors where the chief scientist and the organization see market failures on one hand, see opportunity for future technology to lead Israel forward and to make impact on Israel economy, mainly in IP, technology, and jobs. So we are investing money, and I can elaborate that at the end. Through this, we started to see startups that started to attract investors. And we did a couple of activities here in Israel to help foreign companies to come to Israel and to invest, and I will touch on it in a minute. So now we have the investor community, and we have the startup as a result. And we have now companies that start to grow. And here example from those days that we see a medium-sized company who want to be unicorn, billion-dollar company, but they don't have the fund to become a unicorn. So we decided to make some government action to integrate the institutional, all the pension fund in Israel and large bank and insurance company to invest in Israel. Last and not least is the talent that you have in the country. So the academia, you need a very, very strong academia, top-notch university with the top-notch professors, with a good education system, and we have it. What we don't have, unfortunately, enough is the level of education in the high school and elementary school. And that's something that we are working. The lack of students who their majors through high school is not in STEM, in science and technology and physics and chemistry, was very observant a few years ago. And the high school system created a change to encourage those STEM study and achievement. So what I just described to you, it's a full ecosystem that goes from company, country culture, right government decisions, academia that is strong, create ecosystem for foreign companies to come here. And that all matched together that Israel is generating, I would say, few 2,000 or 3,000 new startups every year now. Some of them growing to become larger companies. And on top of it, we see all the largest technology company around the globe coming to Israel to have research and development center, if it's be Microsoft or Apple or you name it, IBM at the time, Amazon, Toyota, Volkswagen, everyone for its own reason, and I will be happy to elaborate on that.
Wow. Thank you for the overview. Yeah, it's super important during our FinTech week because we have people from the UAE, from Bahrain, from all around the world who are watching you right now. And a lot of them are asking themselves, what is the secret sauce? How is it? And you explained to me that it's a holistic approach. So it's not one thing, or so it's like a more like holistic approach and the ecosystem, as you said. What is the opportunity from your view with the new relations of the UAE, Bahrain, and Israel?
So let me touch on the previous point on the role of how to create within this ecosystem. One of the interesting points here that there is some action that the government has to do to create some, I would say, pocket of excellency in specific topic. I want to touch on FinTech. 11 years ago, Israel had very limited number of FinTech company. The chief scientist at the time said, I see a lot of progress that coming in the field of FinTech. And the chief scientist looked around who can create research and development here in Israel in the FinTech. And they came across Citibank, and they said, okay, look, we will pay you Citibank. And actually, we don't look at Citibank. We said we would like to open here a center of development. And we look for global technology that have about $10 billion deals. And we invited them to come to Israel to develop. And we said, we will give you money. And we gave them money. The same with Barclays. So 11 years ago, we said, you come here, you develop a research center here. And we want you minimum number of employees in the first year, and like 25, and then growing it into 35 in the second year. And they came. And around this, I would say seed money, because it's peanuts to what we're getting today, that the government invested, the FinTech industry started nucleated and started to grow. And today we have more than 500 FinTech companies that operating here in Israel. And that started around this nucleus. So in many cases, if you, and not only those nucleus, but you need a very strong player, a global strategic player that work with you, can bring a lot of needs and globalization. And around that, you start to see a circle of more companies. And that's one of the strong in Israel and link us into United Arab Emirates, where they are very, very strong in fintech. And we can collaborate on new services, new applications, I would say even new regulations, both countries to learn. I think, I'm not quite sure, I didn't test it, but I think that in United Arab Emirates, the adoption of the digital payment, digital deals, is much more advanced than in Israel. And for us, it will be very, very interesting to see the regulation side of that, how this happened. And I know that they are keeping all the security and confidentiality and privacy, same as we would like to be. And we are in the Israel Innovation Authority bringing to our regulators those regulations that done globally outside Israel. So our regulators don't have to start from scratch. They can base what we can bring them to learn. So I think overall on many fields of technology we can collaborate. For me, and Israel, we really want to learn and to learn a lot. And then we'll be happy to share what we know, and that should be the next step, to co-develop the market and work jointly in combined Israeli company together with United Arab Emirates company globally, and develop the technologies.
I absolutely love the approach. Again, listening more, and I think this is why we have the FinTech Week. We're doing half of the FinTech Week is UAE and Bahrain, half of it is Israel, and we're all about learning. By the way, you just reminded me that in September we had the FinTech Nations Summit. It was a summit with all the leading nations and best practices, open banking from Australia to Singapore, Hong Kong, and also the UAE and other nations. And the idea of the FinTech Nations Summit came to me because the finance ministry of the Netherlands said that the Netherlands needs to create these FinTech bridges, like you mentioned. And he mentions two nations, Israel and Singapore, that he wants the Netherlands to cooperate with. So now you're talking about building these FinTech bridges, and it just...
Look, yeah. FinTech cannot be one country. Well, maybe China and the US and the European Union. But if you do not cross borders, if you don't do it globally, you didn't do much. So FinTech is one, you see, agriculture, so your farmland is in your country. That's more, although on technology, it's a cross-border. But in the financial world, if it's not globally, you don't have much, because the trade today, the global trade is so large. And there are very few countries today that can create from raw materials all the way to end product. Everyone brings something from somewhere else in the world, including China, especially if you talk about knowledge and technology. So if you want to buy technology from Israel and you don't have the way to transfer fund and to make it secure and make it trustable, then you don't have much. So I think FinTech is one of the field that must be globally, and I'm really, really glad that more and more countries see it that way and operating toward that goal.
Amazing. I wanted to ask you before we finish also about COVID and how you lead the Innovation Authority during COVID, because people cannot meet and cannot go, I guess, to conferences and to meet face-to-face and create deals. How do you see Israel during COVID with the economy and everything? Because you have a big role, like the Innovation Authority during COVID is doing a lot, right?
Yes. I can tell you briefly on four vectors, four initiatives, actually five that we did. The first one, the early stage, when Israel was kind of unprepared like the rest of the world. We didn't have enough face masks that made in Israel, and it was hard to buy them. We did not have enough ventilation system. We thought we may not have enough. It was panicking. So we made immediately calls for the Israeli local industry and academia to come with a drug for treating COVID-19, for a disinfection system, for a diagnostic system, and we got applications in 3 weeks. We got application worth more than $700 million that companies want from us to help them to develop product which will address the COVID-19 epidemic on all fronts. And we got very quickly enough protection gears and masks and face masks and I think at least 10 different diagnostic to diagnose COVID. So that was, and the government gave special money for that, and that were out to the field. The second is very quickly we saw the economic crisis. Many companies that created multiple IPs and built their teams, all of a sudden their market was shut and now they have no revenue source. At the same time, the banking and even the VC were sitting on the fence and very concerning to commit money to unknown future. So again, we came and we said, look, if you show us, open the book and show us that you cannot last 12 months, we will give you, give us the plan, how you want to survive for another 12 or 18 months, developing product, and we will fund your product, the new product that you want to fund, and we give you 50% of the overall amount that eventually upfront. And we give you this fund 4 weeks after you applied for us. So just that you know, when somebody applied for us, we do a due diligence on the company with subject matter expert to evaluate the project, and we give them the money in buckets, and that money is a conditional loan. The project succeed, you pay us back. The project fail, the loan is forgiven. So here they got from us a conditional loan on a very, very short turnaround. So that was the second element. The third element was the withdraw more fund into the company that already growing by calling for the institutional in Israel to invest where the government is guaranteed 40% of their investment. So that's a long-term debt, investment in those in the growing company. We did not want to risk the pension of the Israeli citizen too much. So we went only for company who already have certain revenue, like a $5 or $10 million revenue. So the level of risk is much, much lower. And the government said, you invest in those companies, get equity, and if your equity goes down by 40%, up to 40% after 8 years, we will guarantee it. The government will pay. We're very confident that the government will never have to put their hands in the pocket. We will not have to take out of the pocket money, because for after 8 years, we're very confident that the value of those companies will go up. Then we saw that the seed in Israel is going down, and we came also with a plan to support VCs or to support company to get money from the VCs, and again by offering the companies some arrangement with the VC, so the VC will be more willing. So if you see the fifth element was many people sitting at home, they have no work. So we said, how about you will be trained now on the new skills? And we funded schools and the companies and the other agencies. If you educate somebody, do some training, we pay you money. If you train and do some assimilation, we give you more money. And if you train assimilation, and assimilation is with a high salary, we give even more money. So that's created a big buzz, and we got many applications that for thousands and tens of thousands, I have to say, of people who applies. So what you just heard here is that we look where we see market failures, even that we're government, we're talking with private sector. In this environment of COVID-19, many market failures. And we try kind of to address those market failures, being dealing with the health situation, dealing with the fund for companies, small and large, and education.
Unbelievable, amazing. I think that during COVID, we are still during COVID, your team is doing an amazing work. I feel you, I see you, I'm telling you, and as somebody from the outside, I'm seeing you, and an ecosystem guy, I'm seeing you all over. And I'm very happy that very quick you found time in your own schedule today to join us. And I encourage each and every one of you to follow the Israel Innovation Authority here in Israel. Maybe the other chief scientists from other parts of the world, regulators who are watching us. Go to the website. You're going to see all the information about the sandbox, the opportunities and stuff that we didn't have time to discuss. So yeah, thank you very much for being here in the summit. That's amazing.
Thank you very much, and have a productive and constructive meeting for everyone.
Yes, thank you. Bye-bye.